excited for this conversation with Crane. He's an old friend from Admiral, wonderful person. And as you'll see, he's like a real community builder. And he got experience in the Bay Area and the tech startup world, and then brought all that experience to Boston, which is a smaller but thriving and vibrant tech community. And now he's helping grow and nurture that tech community, linking founders with investors and just providing a great ecosystem. So I'm really excited about what Matt's doing to promote like real community in the startup space in Boston.
And we tracked him down because he's got one of the most interesting content stories. As a director at an ad tech company, he started a secret blog newsletter business because he wanted to get good at writing and building his craft. And now he's taken all that, has left and exited, and started a community called MGMT Boston, where he interviews Boston founders and VCs as well as operators. And he's going to share a lot of his content journey. This was probably one of the most interesting conversations we've had around building another content business. So he's going through a lot of the pains that we've done and been through. That's what I hope everybody gets out of this, is like, you got to start somewhere, and choosing a project so that you can learn from it. I mean, that's the way engineers figure out how to code, right? So why wouldn't we do the same thing in content? So this is Matt Crane.
What did I miss, Matt? How are you?
We're good. We're ready to go.
All right, I'm going to start. I want to get into it.
Okay.
So you asked how the business is, and the one piece I left out is we have a very interesting thing happening where when we work with people on media, we're almost always addressing as production help, if you will, hired hands for media. It shocks me almost every time. We'll make somebody a set of shorts, they'll come back and they'll say, the shorts are okay. But really, I gained a lot of confidence doing this work with you. Almost every time. Now, if I hung out a shingle and said, we're a confidence shop, I think people would be like, go fuck yourself. But for whatever reason, people who haven't worked with a producer before come out like, they just come out of that crucible with a whole lot more going on than they had going in. And so that's led both of us to kind of be open to it and kind of interested into hearing other people's journey about how they get over that fear of hitting record. How do they actually go and put their story out there? And why the other day when we were talking about guests we'd want to have on the show, like obviously there are a lot of people that we're reaching out to opportunistically because we like what they're doing and we want to do stuff with them. Maybe this is a way to meet them. But there's this other element of like, we know a lot of people who've had to overcome their own version of stage fright. And I don't know how frightened you necessarily were, but I previewed this question. You know where I'm going with this. Tell me about being a secret content creator inside a company where you're kind of worried that people are going to find out that you're running this newsletter. Take us back to those days. Why did you start it? What were you doing? How did it go? I'm betting that Job hasn't heard this before. Am I right? Job,
That's
did
probably
you know
true.
he had a secret content business?
I was not aware.
There are a couple lessons that came from this. So the secret content business was called middling management. It was about basically becoming a manager inside of a company, and like how that transition is hard, and it's hard for the individual journey. It's hard to it's hard to grow a business, etc. And I think there were some key learnings from that I've taken with me to MGMT Boston. Now, one of those is that whether you're private or public or like you, um, everyone starts at a different place. And one of the things that I think you have to really be honest with yourself is your sort of authority level to then spark distribution. And so for me, I think what I learned is that even when public, or if public or private, being a director level person inside of a business in Silicon Valley, of which there are like thousands of people at that level, is not that inspiring relative to, say, you know, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera. Like like the authority level, accordion, if you will, is so wide.
Yeah,
And
but
I think,
after Zuck and Sam is you, right? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, right underneath that. And Sheryl Sandberg and all those great
Yeah.
leaders. But I think what I learned is that um, the content itself, it's important to put a level of effort into that, but distribution is just so important. And you really have to spend just as much time on distribution, if not more, than the actual just content of like, here are my learnings and this is why it's important. And I think, yeah, take the private to the public transition is, even when you are public, and this is like almost a theory on like say stealth founders, for example. People don't realize what it's like when you're shouting from the rooftops on what you're working on and why it matters, and still people don't care. And it's still people like don't think it matters, and you just see how hard it is to get distribution. And I think so. You asked me about like the stage fright thing. I think I just had to go up that curve of understanding that you have to put yourself out there in new, innovative, like scary ways. And you crawl that, you do that like day by day. It's not, you don't have to like
Mhm.
sort of jump off of a ledge on day one, just so people will pay attention so that you can grow. That's
Yeah.
like a huge, I think, thing that smacks you in the face a little bit, that even people close to you that you think care, they've got internet issues. Like they've got so much that they're dealing with every day that they
Yeah.
just don't have time to think about what you're building and what you're working on. So you have
Yeah.
to work that much harder to create distribution and put yourself out there just to sort of stay competitive.
You basically just sparked something that I have to write down before I move on. So if you're like, oh
Okay,
man, he's checking his email.
let's do it.
Um, the thing that I think about a lot with the leadership story you just told is embracing your vintage.
Sure.
And this comes from my coaching practice where I was working with leaders who were in the like directors in Silicon Valley backed companies. And many of them would say like, I'm nowhere, or they'll struggle with imposter syndrome. I don't, I haven't made any progress on this, or my boss worked at Google. I haven't done something like that. And they'll all have a reason, just like I do, a reason why I'm not worthy. And I can give you my list today, and I'll tell you exactly what they are. Well, everybody's got their thing. But I was working with this client who, super good dude, who was telling me about like how hard the startup he was at was. They were very similar to Adroll, but a couple years later doing in a different business. But in terms of like how many people we added, right? Like Crane, when we met you, we were already basically hiring about 100 people a quarter, basically, right? Or
Right.
just the company was just exploding with people, and which meant there were a lot of people trying to figure out like where do I go to lunch and who do I sit with and what's my where do I how do I get my paper signed and all the things that you don't know when a system doesn't have that organization. Well, so back to my coaching client, he's struggling with a lot of those same things as a director running the fastest growing sales team in a segment. And I just asked him, his name was also Matt. I said, who else has done this? And he struggles through it and he thinks about it. And he's like, well, this company did is about our stage, this company, this company. And go, okay. Of all the companies who got Series C this year, that's like 15 or 20 in SaaS that particular year. And most of us, when we're leaders, we're heads down. We don't think about this. But okay, 15 or 20 companies. How many of them are in this B2B space? About half of them. And then the ones who've taken off who are experiencing the same growth. Your vintage of head of mid market or whatever the team you're running, there's five of you. There's five of you. So, like when you say, I'm a director at a company, I'm not that interesting because you're comparing yourself to Sheryl Sandberg. Well, fuck off. I already know how to get Sheryl Sandberg's wisdom. She's got a couple of books. They're good. I
Mm.
like them. But I don't get the here's what I did today from Cheryl. The way that your newsletter was great. It was hard for me not to read it when it would come through because you
Sure.
had these very real stories. I do think it's interesting that you felt compelled to publish anonymous, but you were of a very interesting vintage. You went through a lot of growth that most people sit around and say, someday my company's going to raise a Series B. You know what that jump is from B to C and all the shit that burns down.
That's cool, Matt. I didn't know. So you were publishing anonymously?
Well, there are a few reasons. One is like I always, you always have sort of or not maybe you always, but for me, I had the itch to sort of do something external as like an outlet, and I did that, which was fun. And two, I really wanted to see because I think this in the content game, which you all know now, um, like the hardest part about it is the consistency of actually doing it. So before I was
Mm.
going to go do anything full time, I had to kind of go out, test a bunch of things, and prove to myself that I could actually commit to a cadence. And so that was actually the big thing for me is like I wanted to go see if I liked it, if I could commit to the cadence, and what I would learn from that. And I think I'm not like a professional writer by any means, but I think I got a lot of like value out of doing that. And then you get better and you learn. And so like the lessons that I had pulled into that is maybe to counter Jay Rice's point a little bit. The vintage piece I think is really interesting, but if you're writing about sort of like a very broad topic that doesn't have like a sharp enough niche to stand out, and for me, becoming a manager probably just didn't feel in the end sharp enough to really stand out. that's where like the hyper local element of like, not only can I own this space, but I can own it physically in person. I can own it digitally. Like there's a bunch of different things that I can do here. Whereas like say the newsletter game, for example, right? That's going to wax and wane in terms of like what's going to work, what's not going to work, in terms of like all the things at your disposal and who you're ultimately competing with at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's the other piece of right. We were talking about Max's business and events. Once you throw an event, you have physical proximity to the thing that you're doing,
Yeah,
as opposed to a newsletter that can be read anytime, any place by anyone, can be critiqued by anyone. And there's a lot of good content out there. And there are a lot of people using AI tools to make even more content. So
exactly.
whether it's good content or confusing content, you got to have a fence around it. And you've chosen Boston to have a fence around for now. How's that going?
It's good. So part of it is going through the evolution of like new perspectives. I think that was really important. So I came back from San Francisco after going through the ad roll experience, which was tremendous. Like not many people's first job in startups in tech. You grow from 150 people to 500 people in 18 months. You get to go to Australia, like all this fun stuff. And I had the benefit of like really sitting in the seat and watching an ad roll. No one was really trusting me to run any divisions or heads of functions. So I just got to see a lot and take that in.
That is a great example to my thing about vintage, right? Because it's very easy to be like, well, who's going to listen to me? I wasn't a director. But the truth is, like, you have an amazing perspective from being an IC in a place like AdRoll to
Sure.
go, okay, I'm going to make sense of that. I'm going to see what happens when you have a keg and no HR policies and somebody just bought a trampoline over there and that guy's got a gun mailed to the office. Like, okay, let's see what these guys, let's see what these smart guys are doing with this business,
Right.
right?
And actually the best ad roll learning, which unfortunately was not the best, but the most interesting was we had
Yep.
this business built and growing very rapidly in partnership with Facebook. And then Facebook made the move to mobile by themselves. And we kind of all watched that happen, this like massive platform shift kind of in
Mhm.
our face. And that was a huge like foundational learning about, you grow on the backs of these platforms and that's great. That is a sort of double-edged sword. And like, you know, that's a business case study that you live. And so then the liftoff example, I think similar to AdRoll, I got to do a bunch of things. I grew up from CSM to being the first leader of the team, to sort of leading a region, and we went from 1 million to 100 million plus in revenue at that company. Ultimately, had like a majority investment from Blackstone, so kind of like the classic sort of PE growth playbook, and got to do a bunch of things there. And then I think when we made the move to Boston, how do you take that experience with you to like new people, new place? You can update a resume, which is certainly somewhat effective one to one, but like then you have to kind of keep doing that. And I was like, if I had this problem of I made this move and I don't really know all the great companies here locally, especially coming out of COVID, where it's harder to figure out sort of who and what is here. And then
Hmm.
the opportunities of just how do you make your work travel farther, especially as an operator? Like there weren't a lot of um, articles or reference points for people third party to say like these are all the things Matt has done. So I would have to kind of go one to one to tell that. So how do you build like a motion basically around discovery of what is the work that you've done and what can you do and how do you meet more people and like what are great companies around you and like how do you match some of that up. So that was kind of the foundation of MGMT Boston, where it felt like at least in Boston, and I do have a theory that this is a kind of a challenge that we all have in our sort of global internet economy now, that the local element sometimes gets lost and it's hard to see who's in your backyard. And then how do you help people discover um, their neighbors, their peers, people that they want to partner with, work with, learn from. um, you know if they're busy full time doing their jobs, like they don't have a lot of time to do that as a solo sport, so creating kind of a team mentality around that, that was kind of like the initial sort of crumbs of the business, and then we've been working hard to make that a reality since.
Awesome.
That's
It
cool.
seems like you were born to build this kind of community.
I
Matt, do you
appreciate
feel
that.
that way? Do you feel like you're really like, oh, this is something that I think is my unique superpower?
I don't know if I would say that before, but I think the fun thing, which we've all discovered in different ways, is if you can build something or do something that like never ends. Like it just has like lifetimes of work ahead of it. Like that's kind of the really fun stuff, right? Or if you're solving a problem that you think you can solve in like a year, maybe that's not the right problem to be solving. Like it kind of has to be endless and have all sorts of like concentric circles around it that you can, expand into. Like I think that's the really fun stuff. And I think it does match a lot of things that I'd like to do. So like, in a prior career, before I was in tech, I was sort of in the like, investment banking, finance world. And so now I'm a little bit more on the like almost partnering on the VC side of, early stage folks, which I didn't do in my operating career, but always had interest in. So like I get to touch a little bit more of that. It's fun to obviously explore different verticals. And I think that's one of the things of being in ad tech that was fun is like, even though we were in, you know, a marketing technology company, we got to work with so many different types of companies. It's like, you get
Hmm.
exposure to a lot of different industries, and I always liked that. And
Hmm.
then building things is just something like from a team sport, background growing up, like startups to me were sort of like the adult version of that. And when I found that at AdRoll, I was like, this is, I know what I want to do. So yeah, accidentally over time, I think you combine those things, but when it fits, it fits. And then I think, when it gives you energy, it's a lot easier to invest the time to do that.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. So you've got what kind of traction on the Boston community in terms of the media business?
There's two sides of it. One is like on the actual media side, and I'm hesitant to give out like the subscriber numbers just because like I don't think that matters, honestly. But in terms of resonance, I feel like in terms of the companies, there's like 500-ish venture backed companies. We've already probably highlighted like 150 of those so far.
Okay.
Subscribers on the newsletter were in the thousands. My LinkedIn presence is like 5,000-6,000. So I feel like I get a lot of resonance from that. And then the Operators Club of like people that sort of, subscribe to join, go to our events, be a part of that community is over 100 people here locally. So that was kind of a fun milestone to hit over this past year. And from a revenue perspective, we are growing quickly toward that sort of like six-figure mark, which is important from a brand sponsorship side on one hand, Operators Club subscription side, and then we'll grow from there.
So, have you been recognized out and about for your work yet? Have you had a stranger come up and say, "I see your videos"?
Maybe at an industry event, not like stopped on the street. No, and I think that would be strange. I think that is the benefit of being sort of a business personality is no one cares about business people, right? They only care about um, pop culture references. So I'm confident that's not going to be a problem.
Hey,
No,
you're the
I don't think it's
lantern
a
guy,
problem.
ain't
I
you?
think they're
The
gonna see you.
one funny thing which I actually loved is I highlighted a member of this company, and someone went up to their CEO and was like, "Hey, I saw, you know, your sort of like BDR manager highlighted MGMT Boston. That was awesome." And he went back to the office and he's like, "You're more well known than me. Like, what's up with that?" Which that was my favorite.
That's good. Pissing off CEOs is
Yeah,
always a good thing.
Mm.
exactly. Let's brush the CEO side. Let's
Yeah,
talk about the people actually building the business.
yeah, dude, that's great. Well, I love that you're getting reach on this and that people are like gravitating to it, and that doesn't surprise me one bit. We know people who are the party planners are the ones who connect everybody. So it doesn't surprise me that they're figuring out what you've got, which is really cool.
The other thing too is like I don't go to that many events just because I've got three kids and it's kind of hard to do that. But I
Yeah,
I will do an event a month that I will host, and as a result, it kind of looks like I go to a lot of events because I host the event, but I also know who's coming to my event. So of course
yeah.
I'm well known at my own event, but I get to curate that guest list, and so it has a lot of advantages of like high intent, high impact, low actually quantity. But the perception is a little bit different there, which is kind of funny.
We at startups we talk about unfair advantage a lot. You're now starting to get a distribution network on your
Mhm.
own, which is cool as hell. Is there anything that you're able to do, people you're able to meet, or things you're able to do, or places you can go, where you feel like that leverage is starting to pay off? I mean, speak to the person who is kind of considering posting more.
Definitely, yeah. So the example I give is I think when you put things out publicly, especially without like a clear, loop back, I think it just widens the aperture of opportunities that you can see in a way that you'll never match in a one-to-one, say, outbound sequence. And through that, like even referrals of people advocating on your behalf that you'll never see because of discussions you've had or media that you've put out that they've seen that they've forwarded to other people. And so it's just like a classic network effect that you cannot match individually that I think is fun. And then I go back to like, okay, well, what is the secret? I think is what you're asking. And the secret is very simple. It's quantity. And I think, there's certainly a
Mhm.
quality benchmark that you have to hit, but it is just quantity, especially today on social networks. Like, and I know this is on the Anteater website, but like, there really isn't a lot of viral things you can do or predict to say like, oh, if you do this thing, you put it in this format and you hook it this way, like it'll go viral. You just have no control over that. So the only thing you can really predict is quantity. And so what that's given me is like, I've now done like 100 videos more or less almost with people. And so that gives you a lot of confidence just in terms of like, how to do it, how to like give the intro, you've sort of riffed it enough times. It's a lot of repetitions so that when you go in front of someone who previously would be a little nervous in front of, well, you kind of know the show in a way that they don't. And it is actually kind of funny when you see someone who's like an impressive person that you would have thought, you know, like looking at their LinkedIn photo that you might be a little nervous in, you see their hands shaking a little bit because they don't do this as often as you do. And so it's like anything else. It's not a fake it till you make it. But as you get more experience doing sort of media and putting out content, like you'll just learn things and sort of get more comfortable in a way that someone who doesn't, even if they're more impressive or whatever, they just don't, they don't match that quantity. And so that's the
Yeah.
advantage. It's like just getting the reps in.
My first event was with an investor from Emergence Capital, this guy Joe, and he came out, and I basically interviewed him in like a fireside chat format. And on the last minute, I thought, you know what, I need to start doing video content. And so I went and I found somebody on Thumbtack in Berkeley who threw all his camera stuff in the car and drove over and met me in the city, set it all up, and then when it came time to interview Joe, the first thing he said to me was something about the media, about how I was doing it all wrong. He was very nice about it. He's a super nice guy. So he was like, "Hey, here's some things I would change immediately." And then he sat down and let me interview him. So I had that in the back of my head of like, is this even like the one of his pains was like always have a two camera setup. You want redundancy and you want to be able to cut because if something happens, you just cut to the other camera and nobody can tell. We do a lot of jump cuts on shows like this, but like
Yeah.
that was one of his things. That was the first thing Joe said to me is like, "You're doing this with one camera setup that doesn't make any sense." And I was in the back of my head the whole time. I was like, "Well, should I even ask you the next question?" I'm sure he didn't think that because he was just trying to be helpful. But now I can do what I did as a sales manager. As a sales manager, I have three conversations going. What
Right.
does the rep need to learn? What does the prospect need to hear? And where can we go to close the deal and actually be responsible for revenue? I can do that with media now, which it was a big surprise. It sounds like you're doing the same thing where you're starting to feel that like I'm not nervous about this because the camera's rolling because
Right.
you got the reps in. You're at
Right.
10,000 hours doing media. So of course you're not nervous about that. So what's the next thing you have to learn? So you got distribution starting to figure out,
Ooh.
figuring out your market. You're doing the media thing. You're not nervous when the camera shows up. What are you learning?
Yeah. I think it's every percentage point needing to get better about like what works, what doesn't, messing with formatting. I think podcasting actually like longer form stuff is definitely of interest just because it's another great distribution lever opportunity and like how you cut that up. Scaling existing media is also a huge area of investment over the next 12 months is how do you take all the stuff you've already done and reuse it in effective ways and remixing, reformatting, etc. I think that's something that media people in general tend to do poorly, which is like reuse stuff. You're always trying to create new content, but like how do you actually reuse the stuff that's already good and reformat and repackage it? Um, that's an area. And then I think it's how do you just bridge like yeah, basically how do you just get more bang for your buck of like every asset created, which means how do you take things that you've done with people so that they can use it in different ways to create more value offline, and I think those are the things I'm always thinking about is bridging the offline online piece.
Hmm. So what drives offline for you then?
Just in-person stuff or like how do you use an asset and say like, oh, these people should meet, and then some context for why is like in this piece of media, for example. It's just another way to personalize that.
Have you ever considered like doing a live podcast?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think again, it's like tools, tricks, multi-camera setup. Like that's a little bit beyond me today.
Yeah.
But yes, all of that stuff like totally makes sense
I had a
moving
friend
forward.
who was a producer for what at the time was a pretty big podcast, like kind of streaming show before streaming became a thing. He was producing a show called Dig Nation, which is the founders of Dig.com,
Mm,
talking about what's going on with the internet, Kevin Rose and whatnot. And so he shared with me some of their numbers from when they go do a live podcast, the live Dig Nation. It got to be like that was the experience as opposed to like being inside of South by Southwest. It was like
interesting.
they could choose a city and go do it. And I've seen like My First Million has done some stuff on
Hmm.
and their thing, and so I could imagine something like that where you just say, "Hey, this is the person I'm going to interview. I want to interview you at this conference or in this thing," because I'll bet it would be easier for you to get a stage slot. Like at this point, the size of media company, you're probably not demanding stage time. But if you
Sure.
go, I say, I'm going to interview somebody, and I can do it in this format, and then also bring these five other people from the newsletter, 500 other people on this newsletter, and 500 other people here, and 5,000 people from here, and 10,000 people from there. I'll bet you start to be a big conference drop pretty easily. Is
Mm,
my guess.
yeah. And you made the point earlier, which I think is a good one of like, you don't come necessarily for the confidence building, but that is a benefit you get. One of the interesting things about podcasting that I feel like I've learned externally, not doing it myself, but just what you see is oftentimes listeners will come for the guest, but then stay for the host when they get to know sort of the host. The hosts are not the immediate draw coming out because they sort of operate from a brandless experience, unless you sort of jump from another platform and have an audience built in, but they usually come for the guests and then they stay for the host. And I think that's another thing you sort of have to learn how to weave that in effectively.
So interesting. All right, I feel like I've been monopolizing things, Joe. I know you had a ton of questions. I'll drop back.
No, I just, kind of what's your process for posting like today, Matt? I mean, the one thing that I think about or what I see from you is like you're great on camera now. And I think you're also a great
Appreciate
writer.
that.
So it's like, how do you decide what kind of content you're going to produce? Is it like, what's your process a little bit? How do you decide between video or text?
Yeah. So I think like the best analogy to use there is like um, Ed Sheeran, right? He goes and does a concert all by himself, and you're like, holy, like how does that guy do that? And he's got the looper and like he plays all the instruments and he like stitches all together and you're like that is incredible, but like what is missed there is like the 20 years of learning like each individual instrument, each individual piece. So when I started, I posted like once a week, right? Like one piece of, actually it was twice, so I would try to do a startup and an operator in one newsletter a week. So that's two LinkedIn posts, one newsletter, and that was a lot of work for like a while. Like I
Mhm.
probably did that for at least 6 months. And then I added like another thing, right? And then I was like, I'm gonna do a post about this. And so it's almost like every quarter, every 6 months. And this isn't like super disciplined, but like you just keep adding stuff. And as you learn how to do the previous thing, it gets faster to produce. And I launched in January 2023, so there weren't really like AI tools to leverage back then. And now I've like been able to incorporate some of that. Um, but what that is now, 2+ years later, is I have like a 5-day content calendar, which is effectively, one day that I reserve for like open, I'll call it, but some months it's for a specific slot. Tuesdays is a lantern episode. Wednesdays is the newsletter and the company post. Thursdays is the operator post or like another thing. And then Friday's a lantern episode. So like I have two video, one kind of writing thing each week. And I've been able to stack that. And then I basically have like Monday reserved for like a startup sponsorship piece. Um, and then I just kind of like, I try to do it like 2 weeks at a time. So I kind of have like a bit of like redundancy built in. But that was built up over time. Like you make the New Year's resolution, you're going to go to the gym like 4 days a week, and like 2 weeks in, you're toast because you just can't do that. Like start with one day a week, right? And then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
build up toward that. So it is a like rolling content calendar that I feel like is 2 weeks at a time is the specific answer. And I've just built things in as I've kind of learned how to do them. And then I also pull in some contracting resources, et cetera, to like make sure that I can stay up on it because between like whatever you want to call it, creative work, meetings, it can't all be done in the 40-hour work week. Sometimes you have to do it at night, sometimes you do it during the day, and you just sort of cycle it around.
Wow.
I hope that answered your question.
That
I get
was
a lot of
rad.
hands moving around.
No, you're getting, I mean, it's like, that's the journey going from amateur to pro. You are now fully pro. You have 2 weeks ahead. You have a structure. And like you're saying, now you're good at everything because you've done it as you've like broadened the types of posts. Now you just have like, you're faster at everything.
And actually, I actually think the structure thing is really important because, like, when I like interview, say, someone for a company profile, like, I follow the same structure every single time. So the content's always different, and maybe it looks a little bit different to everyone, but like in terms of formatting, it's always the same. So that really helps from a note taking perspective and writing and all that. And it, you could just do it a little bit faster. And then like I think it's just really hard to wake up and be like, what am I gonna post today? Or write like that's almost impossible, I think. So doing it that's like you have templates and stuff that you use that you can come back to, I think is the only way to do it consistently.
Amen. I've had that problem. Like I'm trying to get into this. I still haven't been able to post consistently twice a week. Even though I'm like,
Because
yeah,
yeah, because if
I'm
you're gonna
encouraged.
like, I'm just gonna sit down at the computer and do it morning of, I mean, it could be anything, right? Like, that's hard to do.
The morning of, I think, is a that's the thing that I think most people, you know, get get caught up in, because some people don't have that feeling of like, oh, I'm got to post. And so for me, if I try to write it morning of, then I have the moment of fear on the publish button,
Right.
and it triggers all the imperfections, all that like, oh my god, do I need to fix this or that, all the perfectionism. Whereas like that schedule post button is really what's helped me out
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
to get off of that.
Did you
Okay,
have,
so
Craig, one more question real quick. Did you have any moments early on where our good friend Johnny DeFazio, like, or other homeboy hit you up and was like, actually, Johnny would never because he's such a sweetheart and a good friend. But other old high school friends maybe who were like, gave you shit for a post, or anybody who was like, I don't know, just razzing
Yeah,
you a little bit in the beginning, or even now.
I think like relatively I have thick skin for that type of stuff anyway, just because I'm like such a giver and a taker. So I think that helps. I think the answer is yes, but honestly, it was and still is shocking to me how much people don't care what you're doing, like because they're just so worried about themselves. Like it's constantly refreshing to hear people that I know really well who are like barely aware of like what I'm doing. And like you go out to dinner with friends, they're like, "Hey Matt, how's it going?" And I start to answer, and they're like, "Okay, like cool, like that was enough. Like we get a gist of it. Like we don't actually need to know everything about it." And I think that actually gives you confidence that people are so drowned in themselves and like what else they have to do to get through the day. I think that like was honestly over time was freeing for me in terms of not having to worry about that. Like you just gotta do your own thing.
yeah, I have an interesting like little side quest off of that point. We have a couple clients who are struggling with videos we're working on where they say, "Oh, I've already said that."
Same thing. You have no idea what little piece of your audience sees any piece of.
Let's say you put it on LinkedIn. Okay, well, LinkedIn video right now is going to luck the best scenario. You're going to hit 10% of your audience with
I
that,
was gonna say 10 tops.
right? And that doesn't mean you should not do it. Like I'm still very into video on LinkedIn, as you know. Like that's where you're
Yeah,
getting a lot of people like building trust, getting engagement, being, becoming those loyal fans. Kind of converting to the loyal fan. But they'll think, okay, well, I've already posted about that. I've already talked about that, so I'm done. And that's not actually how it works. You're not writing a chapter of a book. You are continuing to remind people of your thesis, of your niche, of why you're here. And that's a real struggle for folks. But like you said, most of the people who are the audience, they don't really care. They only care a little bit, and they're starting to care more and more. And hopefully, they're on like some kind of content journey where they become true fans.
yeah.
But I think that's an interesting point.
Going back to the topic selection, I think it's like if you're trying to do like if I had chosen, I don't know, the top 10 startups in Boston, and I was just gonna cycle through maybe by vertical the top 10, I would probably I would feel tapped out after like 10 posts, right? But if
Yeah.
you think about it more of like, what is the mission of all of the important and awesome, you know, startups, entrepreneurship, how companies get built? Like, if you sort of can calibrate it a little bit differently around mission and like then you have a much like wider swath of things to talk about that can have the similar message but different flavors, as opposed to, hey, let me tell you about this product feature that we just released. Like that is going to feel stale, first
Yeah.
time, second time, third time.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, last question. Who's the stretch interview? Who are you trying to get a hold of right now that you can't get a hold of?
Ooh, that's tough. The short answer is it's like public company execs, and those folks are like they're almost like too restricted to like there's so much that they can't say, which is frustrating. Like they're
Yeah.
surrounded by PR teams and lawyers that like is
Okay.
tough.
So
So
if
I don't
for
actually have
your
a great
scenario,
answer for that.
not to ditch a PR team, who would you pull out into the alley with your iPhone and just
Uh,
record an interview with?
I don't have a great answer because I like to let this stuff come to me a little bit. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
But whoever it is, we'll get them eventually. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. So I'm asking you a spearfishing question, and you're saying you just set a funnel, a
I think,
net.
yeah, and I think
Who's
the
gonna
other
come
thing
in
that
the
I've is
That's
I
cool.
love that there's a time and a place to kind of like make things happen, and if you don't need that one specific, like there, it
Yeah.
usually comes your way eventually, and sometimes that's a better,
Yeah.
better thing than just chasing that person.
Well, you brought up Ed Sheeran. Years ago, he was recording in the same spot where Eminem was, and somebody
There
goes,
you
"Hey,
go.
do you want to meet Eminem?" And he said, "No,
I do. I feel like I do remember that story. Yeah,
I'll let him want to meet me someday.
yeah.
I'm keep doing my thing and being focused over here. And now,
That's
I
it.
mean, with the,
That's the
I
move.
don't know anything. All I know is what I see on YouTube. That looks like friends, which is great. A lot of people float in and out of orbits. I'm so glad you're in our orbit, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
It was a pleasure. I wish we
Yeah.
could have done this twice as long and hang in person, but we'll do it next time.